The email arrived on September 8 at 11:23 a.m., just as I was reviewing briefs for a securities fraud case scheduled for the following week. From Jessica Wright. Subject: Anniversary Party Update. Amanda, I need to talk to you about the anniversary party on October 15th. Michael and I have been discussing the guest list, and we think it would be better if you didn't attend. His business partners are coming along with several board members from TechVantage. These are extremely important relationships for his career. You work for the government in some legal capacity, which is fine, but it's just not the same level as what Michael does. I don't want any awkward conversations about career disparities. You understand, right? We'll do lunch soon, just us. Love you. I read it twice, then set my phone down on the mahogany desk in my chambers at the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Through my window I could see the San Francisco skyline, the Bay Bridge stretching across the water. My sister Jessica, 3 years younger than me, had married Michael Chin 2 years ago. He was the CEO of TechVantage Solutions, a mid-sized software company that had recently gone public. The IPO had made Michael wealthy, not billionaire wealthy, but comfortable enough that Jessica had quit her marketing job and now spent her days planning charity galas and redecorating their house in Pacific Heights. I hadn't told Jessica that I was a federal judge. Not deliberately hiding it. I'd mentioned it when I was appointed 4 years ago. She'd said, "Oh, a judge? Like traffic court?" I'd said, "Federal court," and she'd nodded vaguely and changed the subject to her new boyfriend. My family had never quite understood what I did. Law school at Stanford, clerking for a Ninth Circuit judge, 8 years as an assistant U.S. attorney, appointment to the federal bench at 36. To them it was just government work. Nothing as impressive as Jessica's husband running a company. My law clerk, David, knocked and entered with a stack of new filings. "Judge Wright, we just received the case assignments for next month. You're getting the big TechVantage patent case." I looked up. TechVantage? Yeah, the software company. They're being sued by Neural Dynamics for patent infringement. $340 million in damages claimed. It's going to be huge. Lots of media attention, complex technical issues. He set the file on my desk. The CEO is personally named as a defendant along with the company. Michael Chin. Says here he was directly involved in the development decisions that allegedly infringed the patents. My stomach dropped. Michael Chin. You know him. He's married to my sister. David's eyes widened. Oh, do you need to recuse yourself? I opened the file, scanning the case details. TechVantage Solutions had allegedly copied proprietary algorithms from a competitor, Neural Dynamics, and incorporated them into their flagship product. The plaintiff was seeking $340 million in damages plus injunctive relief that could shut down TechVantage's main revenue stream. Michael was named personally because he'd allegedly directed his engineers to study Neural Dynamics code after a failed merger negotiation. If the plaintiff could prove willful infringement, damages could triple. "I'll review the recusal standards," I said. "But being related by marriage to a defendant doesn't automatically require recusal if I can be impartial." "And I can be. Are you sure? This is going to be a high-profile case." "I'm sure." I closed the file. "Schedule a chambers conference for next week. I want both legal teams here to discuss the trial timeline." After David left, I sat with the file thinking about Jessica's email. "You work for the government in some legal capacity." I was a United States District Court judge. I had lifetime tenure. I presided over cases involving billions of dollars, constitutional questions, and matters of national importance. Last year I'd handled a class action against a pharmaceutical company, an antitrust case against a major tech firm, and a complex securities fraud prosecution. And my sister thought I worked some government job. I picked up my phone and typed a response to Jessica's email. I understand. Enjoy your party." I didn't tell her about the case. She'd find out soon enough. The next 3 weeks were consumed with other trials and motions. I sentenced a defendant in a white-collar crime case, ruled on summary judgment motions in 2 civil cases, and presided over jury selection in a trademark dispute. On September 29th, the TechVantage legal teams arrived for the Chambers conference. I'd reviewed all the pleadings. The case was solid on both sides. Good arguments about patent validity, claim construction, and whether TechVantage's code actually infringed. who would go to trial. No settlement was likely given the stakes involved. The plaintiff's team arrived first. 3 lawyers from Morrison and Hewitt, one of San Francisco's elite litigation firms. Then TechVantage's defense team from Caldwell Roberts, equally prestigious. And Michael Chin. He walked into my chambers in an expensive suit, looking every inch the successful CEO. Confident, polished, used to being the most important person in the room. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? He'd met me exactly 4 times. At his and Jessica's engagement party, the wedding, and 2 family dinners. At all 4 events he'd been polite but distant, clearly more interested in networking with my parents' friends than talking to his wife's sister who worked some government job. I sat behind my desk in my robes. "Good morning, counsel. Mr. Chin. Please sit." Michael's lead attorney, Gerald Caldwell, spoke first. "Your Honor, thank you for making time. We wanted to discuss the trial schedule and potential motions in limine." He stopped because Michael had made a small, strangled sound. "Mr. Chin," I said. "Are you all right?" He was staring at me. Really looking at me for the first time. At the nameplate on my desk. Honorable Amanda Wright, U.S. District Court Judge. At my robes. At the seal of the United States behind me. "You're..." He started then stopped. "Judge Wright. Amanda Wright." "Yes. You're Jessica's sister." "I am." His face had gone pale. Gerald Caldwell looked between us, confused. "Your Honor, is there a conflict we should be aware of?" "Mr. Chin is married to my sister," I said calmly. "I've reviewed the recusal standards. My relationship to Mr. Chin is by marriage, not blood. I have no financial interest in the outcome of this case. I can preside impartially. However, if either party wishes to file a motion for recusal, you're welcome to do so." The plaintiff's attorney, Sandra Morrison, spoke up. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has no objection to you presiding. We're confident in your impartiality." Gerald looked at Michael, who was still staring at me like I'd appeared from another dimension. "Mr. Chin, do you have any concerns about Judge Wright's ability to be fair?" Michael swallowed hard. "No. No concerns." "Then we'll proceed," I said. "Trial is set for December 5th. That gives you 2 months for final discovery and motion practice. I want all pretrial motions filed by November 1st. Jury instructions due November 15th. Any questions?" We spent the next 40 minutes discussing technical details. Expert witnesses, exhibit lists, estimated trial length. Michael said nothing. He just sat there looking progressively more uncomfortable as I efficiently managed the conference, set strict deadlines, and made clear that this trial would be run on my schedule, not anyone else's. When the conference ended, Gerald and his team filed out. Michael hesitated at the door. "Judge Wright, could I have a moment?" The plaintiff's attorneys had already left. I nodded to David, who closed the door, leaving Michael and me alone. "I didn't know," Michael said. "Jessica never told me you were a federal judge. Did you ever ask what I did?" He opened his mouth then closed it. I assumed you were a lawyer. Government attorney or something." "I was an assistant U.S. attorney for 8 years. Then I was appointed to the federal bench." "Jessica said you worked for the government. She made it sound like..." He trailed off. "Like it wasn't important?" I finished. "Like it wasn't at the same level as running a tech company." His face flushed. "I never said that." "No, but you thought it. Both of you did. That's why I wasn't invited to your anniversary party. Too awkward to have the underachieving sister around your important business partners." "That's not..." He stopped. "Look, I'm sorry about the party. Jessica said you'd be uncomfortable with the corporate crowd. I went along with it because I didn't think it mattered that much." "It didn't matter," I agreed. "And this case won't matter either in terms of our personal relationship. In this courtroom, you're a defendant in a $340 million patent infringement case. I'm the judge who will ensure you get a fair trial. That's all." He stood there wrestling with something. Finally, "Can you really be impartial? Jessica's your sister." "Mr. Chin, I've presided over cases involving companies where I own stock. I just recuse myself from those specific cases. I've handled cases involving lawyers I went to law school with. I've sentenced defendants whose families I felt sympathy for. Being impartial doesn't mean having no human connections. It means putting aside those connections to apply the law fairly." I leaned forward slightly. And I promise you I am very good at my job. He left without another word. That evening my phone rang. Jessica. Amanda, what the hell? Hello to you too. Michael just told me you're the judge on his case. His huge, company-destroying case. Why didn't you tell me? When would I have told you? Before or after you uninvited me from your anniversary party? Silence. Then, that's not fair. Isn't it? You made it very clear that my government job wasn't impressive enough to be around Michael's business associates. Now you're upset that my government job involves presiding over his case. You're a federal judge. You never said you were a federal judge. Jessica, I told you when I was appointed 4 years ago. You asked if it was like traffic court. I said federal court. You said, that's nice, and asked if I was dating anyone. More silence. You never talk about work, she said finally. You never make it sound important. Because every time I try you change the subject. When I told you about the pharmaceutical class action I handled, you interrupted to talk about your kitchen renovation. When I mentioned testifying before Congress about sentencing reform, you asked if I'd met any celebrities. I didn't know it was that big a deal. It's not about it being a big deal. It's about you never being interested enough to find out what I actually do. I sighed. Look, the case will be handled fairly. Michael will get the same trial anyone would get in my courtroom. Nothing more, nothing less. Can't you just, I don't know, recuse yourself? Get a different judge. I could, but I won't. There's no legal basis for recusal, and I'm not going to step aside from a case I'm assigned just because it's awkward for you. This could destroy Michael's company. Do you understand that? If he loses, TechVantage could go bankrupt. We could lose everything. Then his lawyers should build a strong defense. That's how the legal system works. You're enjoying this, she said bitterly. You're enjoying having power over us. That stung. I'm not enjoying anything. I'm doing my job. If you can't understand the difference, that's your problem, not mine. She hung up. I sat in my apartment looking out at the city lights, wondering if I should have recused myself. Not because I couldn't be impartial, I knew I could, but because it was going to destroy what little relationship I had left with my sister. But then I thought about the law, about justice, about the oath I'd taken to administer the law fairly without favor or prejudice. About the hundreds of defendants and plaintiffs who appeared in my courtroom trusting that they'd be treated fairly regardless of their connections or lack thereof. I couldn't recuse myself just to make my family comfortable. That would be its own form of bias. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind of pretrial motions. TechVantage filed a motion to dismiss, arguing the patents were invalid. I denied it. That was a question for the jury. The plaintiff filed motions in limine to exclude certain expert testimony. I granted 2, denied 3. Every filing, every motion, every order I issued was scrutinized. The tech press covered the case extensively. Legal blogs analyzed my rulings looking for any hint of bias. They found none. I was scrupulously fair, applying the law as I would in any case. Michael appeared at several hearings, always professional, never acknowledging our personal connection in front of others. But I could see the stress on him. This case was existential for TechVantage. If the jury found willful infringement, treble damages could reach over $1 billion. The company would fold. Jessica stopped speaking to me entirely. She blocked my number. Our parents called, confused, asking what was happening. I explained the situation. Dad took my side. You have to do your job, honey. Mom took Jessica's. Can't you just give the case to someone else? For family harmony. There was no family harmony to preserve. There never had been, really. Just the illusion that we were close because we shared DNA and holiday dinners. On November 20th, 2 weeks before trial, Gerald Caldwell requested an emergency chambers conference. Both legal teams crowded into my office. Your Honor, Gerald said, the plaintiff has made a settlement offer. $175 million plus a licensing agreement. My client is considering it, but the board wants certainty about the trial timeline and potential outcomes before making a decision. Sandra Morrison nodded. We're willing to settle to avoid the uncertainty of trial. But if Mr. Chin rejects this offer and loses at trial, we'll be seeking maximum damages including willful infringement. I looked at Michael. He sat rigid, his jaw tight. This was the moment. take the settlement and save the company, but admit wrongdoing, or go to trial and risk everything? Mr. Chin, I said, this is your decision, not mine. But you should know that trials are unpredictable. Juries are unpredictable. You might win completely. You might lose catastrophically. Settlement gives you certainty. Your Honor, he said carefully, do you think we infringed? What I think is irrelevant. The jury will decide based on the evidence. But if you had to guess. I don't guess, Mr. Chin. I evaluate evidence and apply the law. That's what the jury will do. I paused. But I will say this. The plaintiff has strong evidence. Your engineers accessed their code. Your product contains similar algorithms. Whether that rises to the level of patent infringement is a close question. A very close question. Gerald and Michael exchanged looks. We need to discuss this, Gerald said. You have until December 1st to accept the settlement. After that, we go to trial. I stood. Anything else? They filed out. Michael was the last to leave. At the door he turned back. If this was your company, would you settle? I should have refused to answer. It was inappropriate. But something in his face, the fear, the desperation, made me human for a moment instead of just a judge. If it was my company, I'd look at the evidence objectively and ask myself one question. Am I certain enough of victory to risk everything? Because that's what you're doing. Risking everything. I paused. But only you can answer whether the risk is worth it. He nodded and left. On November 28th, TechVantage accepted the settlement. $175 million plus a licensing agreement that would cost them another $20 million over 5 years. It would hurt the company's finances, require layoffs, and tank the stock price. But it would survive. The settlement required court approval. I held a hearing on December 1st to review the terms and ensure they were fair and reasonable. Michael appeared with his legal team. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his suit hanging a bit looser than it had 2 months ago. I reviewed the settlement agreement line by line. It was fair. Both sides were making significant concessions. The plaintiff was giving up the possibility of treble damages. TechVantage was admitting no wrongdoing but paying substantial money. Mr. Chin, I said, do you enter into this settlement freely and voluntarily, understanding all its terms? Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that by settling, you're waiving your right to have a jury determine the facts of this case? I understand. Very well. The settlement is approved. I sign the order. This case is dismissed with prejudice. We're adjourned. The lawyers packed up their files. Michael stood slowly looking at me. Thank you, Your Honor, he said quietly. I didn't do anything except approve a fair settlement. You and the plaintiff made the decision. Still. Thank you. He left. I thought that would be the end of it. Case closed, family drama over, everyone moving on with their lives. Then on December 10th, Jessica showed up at the courthouse. She'd never visited me at work before. Didn't even know where my chambers were. My assistant, Margaret, called me. Judge Wright, your sister is here. She says it's urgent. I had her sent up. Jessica looked different. Thinner. Tired. Her expensive clothes seemed like costumes she was wearing, not reflections of who she actually was. I'm sorry, she said as soon as she entered my chambers. I'm so sorry, Amanda. I gestured for her to sit. For what specifically? For not seeing you. For not understanding what you do. For thinking Michael's job was more important than yours. For everything. She twisted her hands together. The settlement is destroying us financially. Michael might lose his job. The board is talking about replacing him. And all I can think about is how I told you not to come to our anniversary party because your government job wasn't impressive enough. Jessica. Let me finish. Please. She took a shaky breath. I watched you in that courtroom. During the settlement hearing. You were so commanding. Confident. You knew every detail of the case, every legal standard, every precedent. Michael's lawyers, who charge $1,200 an hour, were deferring to your judgment. And I realized I had no idea who you were. My own sister, and I didn't know you. I said nothing, just waited. I called Mom after the settlement. I was angry. I said you could have helped us, could have ruled differently, could have done something. And she said, Jessica, your sister is one of the most respected federal judges in California. She can't compromise her integrity for anyone, even family. That's who she is. That's who she's always been. Jessica wiped her eyes. And I realized Mom knows you better than I do. Mom, who you barely talk to. She knows what you do, knows what you've accomplished, knows who you are. And I don't. You never asked, I said simply. I know. I was so wrapped up in my own life, in Michael's success, in being the wife of a CEO. I wanted to be important by association because I didn't think I was important on my own. And you were actually important, actually doing work that mattered, and I couldn't even see it. We sat in silence for a long moment. The settlement was the right decision, I said finally. If you'd gone to trial, you might have lost everything. This way, TechVantage survives. Michael keeps his job, at least for now. You rebuild. I know. His lawyer said you gave him good advice. That asking him if he was certain enough to risk everything made him really think about the strength of his case. She looked at me. You helped him even after we excluded you, dismissed you, treated you like you didn't matter. I helped him because it was the right thing to do. And because despite everything, he's your husband. I don't want to see you hurt. You should. I've been awful to you. You have, I agreed. But you're still my sister. Jessica started crying then. Not delicate tears, but deep, wrenching sobs. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve you. Probably not, I said with a small smile. But you're getting both anyway. Eventually. Eventually. This doesn't get fixed overnight, Jessica. You've spent years not seeing me. I've spent years feeling invisible to my own family. We can rebuild, but it takes time. And work. Real work. I'll do it. Whatever it takes. She wiped her face. Can I start by asking about your work? Really asking, really listening. So I told her. About law school, about prosecuting white-collar criminals as an AUSA, about the cases that had challenged and changed me. About what it meant to be appointed to the federal bench at 36, one of the youngest judges in the district. About the responsibility of sitting in judgment, of holding people's fates in my hands, of trying to be fair in an imperfect system. She listened. Really listened. Asked questions. Wanted to understand. When I finished, she said, "You're kind of a badass." I laughed. I'm a federal judge. We're not supposed to be badasses. Well, you are. And I'm sorry I never knew it. Over the next 6 months, Jessica and I rebuilt our relationship. Fully. She came to my chambers once a month for lunch. She attended a public hearing where I presided over a high-profile environmental case, sitting in the gallery and watching me work. She read articles about my cases, asked thoughtful questions, tried to understand the legal reasoning. Michael struggled. The settlement had damaged TechVantage's reputation. The stock price plummeted. In March, the board forced him out as CEO. He took a position as COO at a smaller company, a significant step down. It was humbling for both of them. The big house in Pacific Heights went on the market. The luxury cars were sold. Jessica got a job, an actual job in marketing at a nonprofit. They downsized their life, and in some ways it made them better people. In April, they invited me to dinner at their new, smaller apartment in the marina. Thank you, Michael said over pasta that Jessica had cooked herself. For handling the case fairly. For giving me good advice. For not holding our ignorance against us. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than that. You were being a better person than we deserved. He set down his fork. I've thought a lot about what happened. About how I dismissed your career, how I never bothered to learn what you actually did. It was arrogant. And it was sexist. I wouldn't have made those assumptions about a brother-in-law who was a federal judge. But a sister-in-law? I just assumed it wasn't that important. Probably, I agreed. I'm working on it. Jessica's helping me see my blind spots. And there are a lot of them. Jessica reached for my hand across the table. We're both working on it. On being better. On seeing people clearly instead of making assumptions. That's all anyone can do, I said. We talked late into the night. About their new life, my current cases, the ones I could discuss. Their plans for the future. It felt different than before. Built on actual knowledge of each other rather than surface-level pleasantries. As I was leaving, Jessica hugged me tight. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I should have said that years ago. But I'm saying it now. I'm so proud of who you are and what you do. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. Driving home, I thought about justice. In the courtroom, Justice meant applying the law fairly without bias, giving everyone an equal chance to be heard. In life, justice was more complicated. It meant being seen for who you really were. It meant having your accomplishments recognized, not dismissed. It meant being valued not despite your choices but because of them. For years, I hadn't had that with my family. I'd had professional respect, public recognition, the esteem of my colleagues. But not family validation. Now maybe I was getting both. A year later, I presided over the naturalization ceremony for 50 new American citizens. It was one of my favorite judicial duties, welcoming people who'd worked so hard to become part of this country. Jessica and Michael attended, sitting in the public gallery. Afterward, they waited while I congratulated each new citizen. "That was beautiful," Jessica said when I finally made it over to them. "Seeing you up there administering the oath, welcoming those people." I cried. It's a pretty emotional ceremony. It is. But I also cried because I was proud. And because I wished I'd seen you do this years ago. Wished I'd paid attention to your life sooner. Michael nodded. "We missed a lot. But we're here now." "You are," I agreed. We went to lunch at a place near the courthouse. As we walked through the financial district, people recognized me. A lawyer nodded respectfully. A law student worked up the courage to introduce herself and ask about clerkship opportunities. A defendant I'd sentenced to community service instead of jail time stopped to thank me for giving him a second chance. Jessica watched all of this with wonder. People respect you. Really respect you. Some people. Others think I'm too lenient or too harsh. You can't please everyone in this job. But you try to be fair. Always. At lunch, Michael asked about a case that had been in the news. A major antitrust suit I was handling. I explained the legal issues, the arguments on both sides, the difficulty of balancing innovation against monopolistic practices. "How do you decide?" he asked. "When both sides have good arguments, how do you choose?" "I apply the law as best I understand it. I follow precedent. I consider the facts carefully. And I make the decision I think is most consistent with justice and the law." I paused. "And sometimes I get it wrong. That's why we have appeals courts." "Have you ever been overturned?" 3 times in 4 years. Once I think the appeals court was right, I misapplied a standard. Twice I think they were wrong, but that's how the system works. No one's infallible. Jessica smiled. "You're so honest about your limitations. Most people wouldn't admit they make mistakes. Most people aren't federal judges. We have to be honest about the limits of our knowledge and judgment. The moment you start thinking you're infallible is the moment you become dangerous." After lunch, Jessica walked me back to the courthouse. "I've been thinking," she said, "about throwing you a party. A celebration of your career, your accomplishments. Invite your colleagues, your law school friends, people who actually understand what you do. Would you want that?" I thought about it. A party full of people who knew me, who respected my work, who didn't need explanations or justifications for my choices. "I'd like that," I said. "Good. Because you deserve to be celebrated. You've always deserved it. I'm just sorry it took me so long to realize." The party happened in June at a rooftop venue overlooking the bay. 50 guests. Judges, former clerks, law school friends, colleagues from my AUSA days. The chief judge of our circuit attended. 2 of my mentors came. Sandra Morrison, the plaintiff's attorney from the TechVantage case, brought a bottle of excellent wine and told Jessica, "Your sister is one of the finest legal minds I've encountered. You should be very proud." Jessica beamed. "I am." I gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming, for supporting me over the years, for being part of my professional journey. I didn't mention my family's years of not understanding. I focused on gratitude for those who had seen me clearly. But at the end I added, "And I want to thank my sister Jessica and her husband Michael for being here tonight. For taking the time to learn about my work, for supporting me even when they didn't fully understand what I did. Family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up. And they're showing up now. That means everything." Jessica was crying again. Happy tears this time. Later, as the party wound down, Michael pulled me aside. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. For not seeing you, for dismissing your work, for being part of excluding you. If I could go back and do it differently." "You can't," I interrupted gently. "None of us can go back. We can only go forward and do better." "Then I promise I'll do better." "We both will." "I know you will." He hesitated, then said, Can I ask you something? The case, did you ever want to rule against me? To punish me for how we treated you? I thought about lying, saying no, I'd never felt that temptation. But honesty was important. For about 30 seconds when I first got the case assignment, I thought about how satisfying it would be to rule against you on every motion. To watch you squirm. I smiled slightly. And then I remembered my oath. My responsibility. The fact that justice can't be personal. And I let it go. That must have been hard. It was the right thing to do. That's what mattered. He nodded slowly. You're a better person than I am. I'm just a person who chose a career that demands integrity. You do important work too, Michael. Running companies, creating jobs, innovating. It's just different work. Neither is more valuable than the other. They're just different. Jessica said something similar the other day. That she'd spent years thinking corporate success was the only success that mattered. That she'd internalized the idea that making money was more important than serving the public. That she'd been wrong. She's learning, I said. We all are. 2 years after the TechVantage case, I was elevated to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The appointment was a huge honor. Circuit judges hear appeals from all the district courts in the western United States, setting precedent that affects millions of people. My confirmation hearing was intense. Senators questioned me about my judicial philosophy, my decisions, my approach to the law. Jessica sat in the gallery watching every moment. When one senator praised my commitment to fairness and thoughtful application of the law, I saw her smile with pride. The confirmation went through. I was sworn in on a crisp October morning at the San Francisco courthouse. The Chief Justice of the United States administered the oath. 200 people attended. Jessica and Michael sat in the front row next to my parents. Mom cried. Dad beamed. And Jessica looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Genuine understanding of who I was and what I'd accomplished. At the reception afterward, Jessica introduced me to people. This is my sister, Judge Amanda Wright. She was just confirmed to the Ninth Circuit. She's one of the youngest appellate judges in the country. Not my sister who works for the government. Not vague references to a legal career. Clear, proud statements of fact. That night at a small family dinner, Dad raised his glass. To Amanda. We always knew you were special. But I don't think we understood just how special until recently. You've achieved something remarkable. You've built a career based on integrity, intelligence, and fairness. We're proud of you. We should have told you that more often. You're telling me now, I said. That's what matters. Jessica stood. I want to say something too. Amanda, I spent years not seeing you. Not because you were invisible, but because I chose not to look. I was threatened by your success, intimidated by your intelligence, and too insecure to acknowledge that my little sister had accomplished more than I ever would. I'm sorry it took a $340 million lawsuit for me to finally pay attention. But I'm grateful that you gave me a second chance. That you're still my sister even after everything. I stood and hugged her. Always, I said. No matter what. Later as I drove home alone, I thought about the journey. From being the dismissed sister with the government job, to being a respected federal judge. From presiding over my brother-in-law's case to being elevated to the appellate court. From family invisibility to recognition. The professional success had come first. That had been within my control. Work hard, make good decisions, earn respect through competence and integrity. The family recognition had taken longer. It had required them to do the work of seeing me, and me to do the work of letting them. Both mattered. Both were necessary. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't just what happened in courtrooms. It was what happened in families when people finally chose to see each other clearly. When accomplishments were acknowledged. When value was recognized. When love was paired with understanding. I'd been a judge for 8 years. I'd issued hundreds of rulings. I'd overseen dozens of trials. I'd been affirmed, reversed, praised, and criticized. But the ruling I was proudest of wasn't from the bench. It was the decision to give my family another chance. To believe that people could change, could grow, could learn to see what they'd missed. That required a different kind of justice. One that balanced accountability with mercy, truth with grace, boundaries with forgiveness. I was still learning. We all were. But we were learning together. And that was enough.